Edward, are they all set? Thank y'all for being with us here today. I'm joined by Rania, who is, what's your title? Is it CEO? There it is, right there.
You can be whatever you want it to be.
CEO of Crime Stoppers. And I got to tell you, I work on these Crime Stopper-based issues or anti-crime issues, fighting back against crime across the state of Texas. The point is this. I don't know of anybody anywhere in the state of Texas that does more to address violent repeat crime than Rania does. Unfortunately, as we're going to hear from stories today, there's a high volume of violent repeat crime in Harris County, Texas. We've got people in this room who are victims of that crime who are sick and tired of it. They're tired of the environment that we're in right now. They have every expectation that something's going to be done to address this out-of-control, repeat, violent crime in Harris County, Texas. But we would not have the capabilities of being able to do all that without people like Rania and Crime Stoppers. I'm going to introduce Chuck Cook later, who is one of many family members here who has lost a loved one because of violent crime, repeat offenders, and all kinds of problems. We have some judges with us here today, local leaders, obviously you can see law enforcement, which I very much appreciate being here. The challenge we're dealing with today is not a law enforcement-based challenge. This is a judicial problem with our judges, and it's a problem with the Constitution, as I will get to here in a second. We're here today to tackle what should be a bipartisan issue, a non-partisan issue. It's a common sense issue of public safety, and that is fixing the deadly and broken bail system that lets dangerous criminals right back out onto our streets. We're joined today by a lot of families who lost loved ones or had a loved one assaulted by a criminal that was released on either easy bail or in fact no bail at all. Most of the people I've heard stories from here today, they had a loved one killed many times by a repeat criminal, arrested even for murder before, and sometimes let out on PR, personal reconnaissance bonds, roaming the streets, only to murder again, losing their loved one. The stories shared today are heartbreaking. Everybody in Texas, especially decision makers, must hear these stories and respond to them in ways that correct the legal system in the state of Texas. The fact is that activist judges in Harris County are protecting dangerous criminals instead of the innocent people they victimize. Since 2019, just in the Houston area alone, there are over 200 cases of dangerous criminals let out on low cash or no cash bonds only to see them kill an innocent Texan. One of the many Harris County horror stories involves Jesse Leal. Leal was a career criminal with 16 different mugshots for 16 different crimes. Despite this rap sheet, a Harris County judge let Leal out on a personal reconnaissance bond. Free once again, Leal murdered his wife in front of their very own children. The woman was slaughtered in Texas State Representative Ana Hernandez's district. Local state representatives like Alma Allen and Armando Wally also have tragic cases like this in their House districts. To ensure crimes like this do not happen again, we need those state representatives to work with us on tougher bail policies that I'm proposing today. Another horrific story involves Austin Collette from Harris County. Collette was charged with murder, and he pled guilty to that charge. While he was awaiting awaiting sentencing, the confessed murderer was let out on bail by Harris County Judge Hillary Unger. 3 months later, this confessed murderer, let out by Judge Unger, murdered his 21-year-old girlfriend. The woman was slaughtered in Representative Jolanda Jones's district in Harris County. Representative Jones should also support these tougher bail policies that are seeking to make sure crimes, murders like this, don't happen in her district anymore. And you're going to hear more here shortly about Rosalie Cook. But I just got to summarize it this way. She was stabbed to death by a criminal with more than 60 convictions, who, after those 60 convictions, was on 2 felony PR bonds at the time that he murdered this man's mother. These are not isolated incidents. Hundreds of Texans have been murdered by violent criminals who have been previously arrested and released on easy bail. That is why I made bail reform an emergency item this session. Judges have far too much discretion to set easy bail on dangerous criminals. To be clear, this isn't a left or right based issue. This is a public safety issue. To fix the broken bail system, which, by the way, so you'll understand the context, bail in Texas is different than it is in other states. Bail in Texas is put into the Constitution itself. To change the bail system requires changing the Constitution. To fix the Constitution and to fix the broken bail system, we need to amend the Constitution to do several things. 1, judges must automatically deny bail for violent crimes like murder, rape, and human trafficking unless there is clear and convincing evidence that the defendant will appear in court and not endanger the community. This shifts the burden for repeat violent criminals to prove that they are not a danger to the community before they're released. 2nd, judges who release violent criminals on easy bail must explain their decision to the public in writing so that they can be held accountable by the public. 3rd, prosecutors must have the right to appeal a judge's questionable bond decision so the Court of Appeals can quickly return that dangerous criminal back behind bars where they belong. The fact is that too many judges grant repeat offenders 2nd, 3rd, even 16th chances that they don't deserve. State representatives must fix that by passing this constitutional amendment. Lawmakers have to choose. Are they going to support the safety of the citizens they represent or the criminals who kill them? Next is Rania.
Thank you, Governor Abbott. It's an honor for you to be here. I'm Rania Mancario, CEO of Crime Stoppers of Houston. We also have some other elected officials in the room with us today. Harris County judges Aaron Burdett, Lori D'Angelo, Emily DeToto, Dan Simons, Caroline Dozier, Peyton Peebles. We previously had a Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, representatives from the Harris County District Attorney's Sean Tier's office, Harris County Precinct 3 Commissioner Tom Ramsey's office, and Harris County Precinct 4 Constable Mark Herman's office. We're all here today, and thank you for being with us as well. We also want to thank the families. There are many families around us, and we're here because of you, because of your stories. Today we gather to acknowledge a system that's failed, to recognize lives taken too soon, and to demand reforms that are quite frankly overdue and critical to protect the safety and future of every Texan. As many of you know, since 2018, Crime Stoppers of Houston has been tracking the number of Harris County residents allegedly killed by defendants on felony bond. As our research and tracking grew, our team eventually launched the Glenda Gordy Research Center. And at the request of Senator Joan Huffman and others, the center continued to monitor bond practices in Harris County. Governor, our findings were alarming. Between January 1st, 2021 and December 31st, 2024, 162 homicide cases were filed against defendants who were released on one or more bonds at the time of the offense. These are not just statistics. These are numbers that represent real people, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, children, peoples whose lives were violently and tragically cut short. They include the stories of Rosalie Cook, an 80-year-old grandmother who was fatally stabbed by a man with more than 65 prior convictions, yet out on 2 felony PR bonds. Shaniqua Banks, a young mother of a 3-year-old who was allegedly murdered by a defendant already on parole for a violent offense, yet who was granted a PR bond for a new felony charge. Joshua Sandoval, a son and brother who was murdered by a defendant who, at the time of the offense, had active felony bonds totaling $1.65 million across 3 counties. These tragedies are not isolated. In fact, our list now includes over 212 people allegedly killed since we began tracking in 2018. This, as I said, is alarming, and it represents a growing pattern, a crisis, as you called, chaos, where violent repeat offenders are given bond after bond, with devastating consequences for innocent families and communities. For everyone here today, this is a legislative process. Yes, it is. But it must rise above the politics. For everyone here today, this is about public safety and ensuring that our judicial system protects the law-abiding citizen while upholding the fundamental principles of justice and accountability. Bond practices must be rooted in a balanced approach that weighs the rights of the accused alongside the undeniable rights of the public to be safe. When an individual has demonstrated a repeated propensity for violence, when they have forfeited bond after bond, when their release poses a threat to the community, the system must have the tools and the will to intervene. Because a system that creates an opportunity for Houston grandparents to be stabbed to death when they're simply buying greeting cards at a Walgreens is broken. A system that also creates opportunities for young men and women to commit crime after crime after crime is also broken. This current system victimizes literally everyone. Crime Stoppers of Houston stands firmly in support of common sense bond reform that prioritizes public safety, restores judicial discretion, and brings much needed transparency and accountability to the process. We also call on every leader, policymaker, and community member not to hijack this issue or stall progress. Instead, collaborate despite differences in a true effort to find solutions, because we know that working together makes a difference. Governor, in the 86th Texas legislative session, you made Senate Bill 6, the Damon Allen Act, a priority. The act would prohibit defendants charged with certain violent crimes from receiving a PR bond. Crime Stoppers of Houston worked with over 5,300 concerned Houstonians who signed petitions, and worked alongside a bipartisan Senate in support of Senate Bill 6. Senate Bill 6 was enacted into law in December of 2021, and we are proud to share that there has been an 84% decrease in the number of Harris County residents allegedly killed by defendants out on multiple felony PR bonds when you compare 2021 to 2024. This significant decrease successfully correlates to the work of all those within the criminal justice system when we're willing to work together. Together, we must build a system that values life, that protects communities, and that refuses to allow violent offenders to cycle endlessly through a broken revolving door. We are committed to doing whatever it takes to that end and to standing alongside all of you as victim families, who, as one victim family has said, you all ultimately serve the life sentence and living life with the loss of a loved one. We're here and committed to do whatever it takes. And thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for Crime Stoppers. Now for Chuck Cook.
Thank you, Rania and Governor Abbott. I am honored to be here today to lend a voice to the victims all across the state of Texas, and especially here in Harris County. But, I'm really here to tell you about Rosalie Cook. And that's her picture here down here. She's a mother of 3, grandmother of 7, great-grandmother of 5 and counting, the patriarch of the Cook family. And as I think back about my mom and I think about my early memories of her, I was always awed by her sacrifice, her dedication, and her tireless work for her family. Her typical day when I was a youngster was she would get up early, get my dad up, she would prepare his breakfast and pack his lunch, and then she would come get all the kids and pack us all in the car. We only had one car. And she'd take them to work, and then we'd come back and we would go get ready for school. She'd make our breakfast and pack our lunch and send us off, and then she'd do the same for herself, and then off to work herself. And then she was home before the kids got home from school, and then we packed all in the car again, picked up Dad, came home. She cooked supper. Supper was on the table at 5 p.m. every night. You could say you watched by it. And then it was baths, dishes, maybe a sitcom in the news, and wash, rinse, repeat. Never complained. She was loving, caring, and affectionate. She was a great hugger, quick to tell you that she loved you. And I honestly felt unconditional love from my childhood throughout my adulthood. Now, she was no softie, don't get me wrong. I mean, she didn't put up with nonsense. I don't know how she found out that Hot Wheel tracks make a good switch. What, a couple of smacks on the back of your legs and your attention is gotten. I tell you, I'd get a new Hot Wheel track for Christmas, and I didn't know whether to play with it or put it under my bed, like way under my bed where her short arms couldn't reach it. But she was my best friend. She was unpretentious, humble, simple. She didn't require much at all. She wore very little makeup. I can tell you that she never had a professional manicure or pedicure her entire life. She rarely spent money on herself. I would come visit her, and she'd have this little gleam in her eye like she'd gotten away with something. I'd say, "What's going on, Mom?" She goes, "Well, I was in the mood for ice cream today, and I went to Wendy's and got me a $1 Frosty." And I said, "Oh, man, you're starting to walk on the wild side." The occasional hairdo was really her treat. Here in her Christmas picture below, you can see that hairdo. That's what she'd do for herself every now and then. Now, about her physically, to picture my mom, you could just read any childhood story about the little old lady, and that really encapsulates my mom. She was 5 foot tall, a little plump. She was disabled. She could only shuffle with assistance of a cane or a walker. She was a widow. She lived alone, determined to be independent. And, all this made her the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. And she knew that. She did not take risks with her safety. She did not go out after dark, and she only went out during the day. But not quite 5 years ago, on a Saturday morning, she went to her local Walgreens to get some greeting cards to send off. She still sent out birthday cards to everybody. And a couple other items. She chatted with a little old lady behind the counter who she's gotten to know over the years and got caught up on grandkids, and you know the type of conversation. And then because she's disabled, she parked in the handicapped spot right outside the door. And as she walked out, didn't need to go 8 feet, she was met by Randy Lewis and stabbed, murdered, for her purse and her car. And as said before, Randy Lewis had 67 prior convictions and was out on 2 felony PR bonds. There's really no excuse for it. Really, no excuse. He was let out with no accountability, not an ankle monitor, nothing. You know, the best predictor of the future is to look at the past, and this certainly applies to human behavior. Randy Lewis certainly proved that that saying is true. He had no business being on the street again. His past was a clear indicator that he had no respect for persons or the law. You know, my mom died a lonely, painful death on the hot asphalt of a Walgreens parking lot, drowning in her own blood. The system is supposed to be designed to protect the public, and most importantly, the most vulnerable. The system failed my mother, and as been said already, unfortunately, her case is not isolated. You know, there's a saying that goes, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Meaning, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. And it is long overdue to strengthen the bond system, especially regarding violent offenders. Now, Senator Huffman has proposed several bills that have made it through the Senate. They're in the House, as Governor Abbott had mentioned earlier, and we're hoping to get them out of the House. Smithy is sponsoring them in the House, and I'm 100% behind every one of those proposals and constitutional amendments. There is one that I just want to make a special mention about. There's House Bill 799 right now that is being sponsored by Moody. It basically says that the default judgment for a defendant is a PR bond. That's the default, and then you go up from there. Now, we all know how I feel about PR bonds. It's a slippery slope. It enables criminals. You know, there's not one decision, bad decision, that I've ever made that I did not suffer the consequences for. And some of my decisions caused others pain, and it just happens. You see, my mom never enabled me. They weren't going to suffer any consequences based on my decisions. You know, back in the 70s, perhaps when Juliana was cleaning up New York, the saying was, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. You know, there's an argument about that it affects some of the lower income folks more disproportionately, and that may be true. But you have every right to make the same decision that I have, or anybody else has. You see, my mother didn't have a choice. She is relegated for eternity in a grave. She doesn't get 2 years and get out. Or whatever the case may be that you got to wait for your trial. I'm not concerned. That's a you problem, not a public safety problem. At any rate, as the House considers these bills, I asked them a couple months ago that as they consider them, that they picture my mother's face and make the decision accordingly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. I thank all of these families who've gone through so much for taking the time to come out and share their stories, share the importance of their stories. Listen, as we get here right now, there are thousands of bills that are working their way through the legislature. None of them have the deadly consequences as much as this legislation to amend the Constitution to keep these deadly, dangerous, violent criminals off the streets. Surely everybody of every political background in the Capitol, we can agree that we want fewer murderers out on our street murdering again. That's all that we're asking. Get legislation passed, instilled in the Constitution, that ensures that murderers who are arrested are not going to be released on PR bonds or otherwise out on our streets, killing somebody else, like the family members of those gathered around me today. You have the power to end the deaths, or you have the responsibility for additional deaths that occur. We'll take a few questions.
Do you endorse SJR 5 as it was passed by the Senate? I wasn't sure what you described at the beginning.
So to be clear about what you're talking about, you're talking about the latest iteration of the Huffman JR? Okay. So Senator Huffman and I and my staff have worked on that. And she is in agreement with me on the proposals that I've articulated today. So I think she would be in favor of a modification of her JR.
Just to clarify what you described today, is if I went to the legislator online, it's not the same as what's in that resolution.
Correct. That's my understanding. And that's why I wanted to be clear, because these things can get updated all the time. But the last, put it this way, the last JR that passed the Senate that I'm aware of did not have in it the points that I outlined today that we have talked to Senator Huffman about and that she is in agreement with.
Governor Abbott, Jason on stage, and a couple of groups held protests, so to speak, before your event, one across the street here in UCLA, Texas, the Criminal Defense Attorneys Association downtown. And one of the quotes was, you're using heartbreaking tragedies to push legislation that may not have prevented. What do you say to that?
Wow.
Really? To the
Wow.
innocent until proven guilty. If you give somebody no bond when they're just accused and not convicted, that's the main issue.
That's an insult to families who have a murdered family member. I mean, think about it. These are people who have no logic. Let's look at the logic here. Each of these families lost a loved one to someone who murdered them, who had previously committed either a murder or other violent crime. If they were behind bars, it would be physically impossible for them to have murdered the family member, the people with me today. Behind bars, can't commit the murder. Get out on a PR bond, roam in the streets, commit the murder. That's an insane argument. And that is exactly why. This is the type of issue that people at both parties can come together. This is common sense. You pass this bill, pass this constitutional amendment, lives will literally be saved. You fail to pass this, more people are going to be murdered. This has to get done.
Do you have a timeline as far as how soon you'd like to sign it into law?
Well, so because it's a constitution.
When it becomes a constitutional.
Well, it has to get. So here's the way that it works procedurally. It's called a joint resolution, which is another name of a constitutional amendment as opposed to a bill, and it has to pass 2/3 of the House and Senate, and then it's going to be on the ballot in November if it does pass. But the timing to get it passed will be before the end of May. So we have a month to get this done.
Two more questions. What is the probability these reforms are going to be?
Would you start over again, please?
Yeah, what do you think is the probability that these reforms will be successful in these reforms?
Listen, there's every reason to believe these reforms are going to be successful and that this constitutional amendment is going to be passed because everyone should agree that we need to act to prevent other people from dying because of the PR bond rules that allow these judges in Harris County to let dangerous criminals on to the street just to kill again. So I feel very confident about it passing.
Governor, Chair Ward, CW 39, what challenges are we facing with getting this on the ballot?
I'll be honest with you, straightforward. There are 88 Republicans in the Texas House who I know will support this proposal. And to get it passed, we need 12 Democrats in the Texas House to agree to this. And so it's just a matter of gaining the support of 12 Democrats. Kennedy, if you have just the Democrat delegation from the greater Houston area, that would get it done.
That's all we got time, folks. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. There's one more here.
Thank you once again.
Appreciate you.
I did support you.